My name is Eleanor Wilson, and at 67 years old, I never imagined my son Matthew would betray me this way. We were always close, especially after Frank passed. That's why his phone call left me breathless. Mom, we changed the locks. You don't live here anymore, he said coldly. Instead of breaking down, I replied calmly, That's very brave of you. He didn't realize I'd been preparing for this moment. The stunned silence on his end was just the beginning of what would become the most painful battle of my life. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself when family turns against you. Frank and I had been married for 39 years when cancer took him from me. Those first few months alone in our house were unbearable. The silence echoed through every room, and I found myself talking to his empty chair at the dinner table. Matthew noticed my struggle during his weekly visits with Heather and the kids. Mom, he said one Sunday afternoon, we've been talking, and we think you should move in with us. The kids would love having you around, and that big house is too much for you to manage alone. At first, I hesitated. I valued my independence, and wasn't sure about living under someone else's roof, even if it was my son's. But then little Lily, only 2 at the time, climbed into my lap and asked, Gamma stay forever? How could I say no to those innocent eyes? Plus, Matthew and Heather had been struggling to afford a larger home in a good school district. It seemed like the perfect solution for everyone. I could help with the down payment, I suggested. Frank and I had been saving for retirement, and now that he's gone. I couldn't finish the sentence, but Matthew understood. We sat down the following weekend with a notepad at their kitchen table. Matthew, Heather, and I worked out the details. I would contribute $250,000 toward their new home. It wasn't a gift but an investment. We put it in writing that I would have partial ownership proportionate to my contribution, with living rights for as long as I wanted. Heather seemed particularly interested in making sure everything was properly documented. We should get this notarized, she suggested, and I appreciated her attention to detail. Matthew signed the agreement, as did Heather and I. We each kept a copy, and I stored mine with my other important documents. The first 2 years were everything I had hoped for. I moved into the spacious in-law suite on the ground floor, which had its own small sitting area and bathroom. I watched Jackson and Lily when Matthew and Heather were working, prepared meals several times a week, and contributed to the household expenses beyond my initial investment. The children thrived having their grandmother around, and I found purpose again after losing Frank. I taught Lily to bake Frank's favorite chocolate chip cookies, and helped Jackson with his reading skills. You're a miracle worker, Mom, Matthew said after Jackson's teacher praised his improvement. We're so lucky to have you. Beyond my initial investment, I continued supporting them financially. When their refrigerator broke, I purchased a new one without hesitation. When Heather mentioned wanting to renovate the master bathroom, I contributed $8,000 to the project. I paid for summer camps, piano lessons, and countless other expenses that would have strained their budget. I never kept track of these contributions because we were family, and that's what family does. Around the 3rd year, I began noticing subtle changes in Heather's behavior toward me. What started as occasional sighs when I offered opinions about household matters escalated to eye rolls and abrupt exits from rooms when I entered. If I suggested an activity with the children, Heather would often counter with an alternative plan. I think Jackson would prefer the Science Museum this weekend, I said one Friday evening. Actually, I've already promised him we'd go to the water park, Heather replied without looking up from her phone, though I'd heard no such discussion. Matthew, who had always been my advocate, began to distance himself as well. When I approached him about Heather's increasing coldness, he dismissed my concerns. She's just stressed about work, Mom. Don't take it personally, he said. But the way he avoided eye contact told me there was more to the story. By year 5, the tension had become palpable. Conversations at dinner were strained, and I found myself spending more time in my suite to avoid uncomfortable encounters. Still, I cherished my time with Jackson and Lily, now 10 and 7. They were blissfully unaware of the adult dynamics, still running to my door after school to tell me about their day before their parents came home. One evening, I overheard Matthew and Heather arguing in their bedroom. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their raised voices carried down the hallway as I returned from the kitchen with my tea. "I can't do this anymore, Matt," Heather hissed. "It was supposed to be temporary. 5 years of your mother watching every move I make in my own home. What do you expect me to do?" Matthew responded, his voice tired. "She invested in this house. She has rights. Figure it out," Heather snapped. "Either she goes or I do." I retreated to my room, my heart racing. That night, I pulled out the agreement we had signed 5 years earlier and read it thoroughly. The language was clear. I had partial ownership and living rights. But I also knew that legal documents meant little when family relationships deteriorated. For the first time since moving in, I began to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. The following weeks were excruciating as I watched Heather's hostility grow more overt. She no longer bothered hiding her irritation with my presence, sighing loudly when I entered common areas of the house. "I was just about to have some quiet time," she would say pointedly, until I retreated back to my suite. What hurt most was watching Matthew transform from my loving son into a silent bystander who averted his eyes during these encounters. Heather began rearranging furniture without consulting me, including moving family photos that included Frank to less prominent positions. When I gently questioned these changes, she responded with cutting efficiency. "This is our home, Eleanor. We need to make it feel like ours." The absence of Mom or even Mrs. Wilson spoke volumes. The kitchen, once my domain where I prepared family meals, became contested territory. Heather complained about the way I organized the pantry and rearranged it constantly. "Your system doesn't work for me," she declared, discarding the labeled containers I'd purchased. My cooking, once praised by everyone including Heather, now received criticism. "The children prefer less seasoning," or "we're trying to eat healthier now." One Wednesday afternoon, I was helping Lily with her homework when Heather returned from work early. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Lily, go to your room. I need to speak with Grandma." My granddaughter gathered her papers reluctantly and left with a concerned glance back at me. "I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't undermine my parenting," Heather said once Lily was out of earshot. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, genuinely confused. "Lily told me you said she could have ice cream after dinner if she finished her homework. I already told her no sweets this week." It was such a minor issue, yet Heather's reaction seemed disproportionate. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. She didn't mention it." "That's the problem, isn't it? You don't consult with us before making decisions about our children." The emphasis on "our" felt like a door closing in my face. These were my grandchildren, yet Heather was drawing a clear line separating me from them. That evening, I called my old friend Barbara, who had warned me years ago about the potential pitfalls of my arrangement with Matthew and Heather. "They're starting to push me out," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I don't know what to do, Barb." "Document everything," she advised firmly. "And call Patricia Reynolds. She's the best elder law attorney in the county." I hesitated. Getting legal advice felt like an escalation, an admission that my own family might try to take advantage of me. But Barbara's next words solidified my resolve. "Eleanor, Frank wouldn't want you homeless at 67. Protect yourself." The next day, I called Patricia Reynolds and scheduled a consultation for the following week. I didn't tell Matthew or Heather, instead saying I was meeting Barbara for lunch. Patricia reviewed my investment agreement and listened to my concerns with a gravity that validated my growing unease. "This is unfortunately common," she said, her expression compassionate but determined. "But you've done the right thing by keeping documentation. Let's gather everything and create a contingency plan. Just in case." Just in case became reality sooner than I expected. The following weekend, Matthew announced that he and Heather were taking a short vacation, just the two of them. "To reconnect," he explained vaguely. "Mom, you'll watch the kids, right?" Of course I agreed. Jackson and Lily were thrilled to have a grandma weekend, and we planned all their favorite activities. On Saturday afternoon, while the children were playing in the backyard, I drove to the local pharmacy to pick up a prescription. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Matthew's car outside Carson's Hardware across the street. Curious, since they were supposedly 2 hours away at a beach resort, I parked and walked closer. Through the store window, I saw Matthew and Heather speaking with Jim Carson himself, examining what appeared to be door locks. My stomach dropped as Jim nodded and wrote something on an order form. This wasn't a romantic getaway. They were planning something that clearly involved me. Instead of confronting them, I returned home and called Patricia immediately. I think they're planning to change the locks, I told her, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. Do you have somewhere you can stay if needed? She asked. Barbara has offered her guest house before, I replied. Pack an emergency bag with important documents and medications. Don't let on that you suspect anything, but be prepared. I'll draft an initial letter we can send if necessary. That night, after the children were asleep, I quietly gathered my essential documents, including the house investment agreement, bank statements showing my contributions, and personal items I couldn't bear to lose, including Frank's wedding ring and photos of our life together. I placed everything in a suitcase and hid it in the back of my closet. The vacation lasted 3 days. When Matthew and Heather returned, they barely spoke to me, but I noticed significant glances between them. I maintained my normal routine, giving no indication that I suspected their plans. On Thursday morning, they left for work earlier than usual, taking the children to school first. The house felt eerily quiet as I sipped my coffee at the kitchen table. At 10:17 a.m. my cell phone rang. Matthew's name flashed on the screen. "Mom," he said without preamble, his voice strained but determined. "Heather and I have decided it's time for you to find your own place. We've changed the locks, and we need you to understand that you don't live here anymore." Despite anticipating this moment, the actual words stole my breath. 5 years of love and support, $250,000 invested, countless hours caring for his children, and this was how my son repaid me. A coldness settled over me that had nothing to do with fear. "That's very brave of you," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Clearly, he had expected tears, pleading, anything but calm acceptance. "What?" he finally managed. I said, "That's very brave. Locking your mother out of her home without warning. Tell me, Matthew, did you think about the legal implications? Or was this entirely Heather's plan?" "Mom, it's not like that," he stammered. "We just need our space back. We can help you find somewhere else to live." "I see. Well, I won't keep you. I'm sure you have a busy day ahead." I ended the call before he could respond and immediately dialed Patricia Reynolds. "It's happened," I told her. "They've changed the locks. Are you safe? Do you have your documents?" She asked immediately. "Yes to both. I'm going to Barbara's now." "Good. I'll send the letter this afternoon." "Eleanor," she paused, "are you absolutely sure you want to proceed? This will likely permanently damage your relationship with your son." I thought about the son who had held my hand at Frank's funeral, who had promised to always take care of me, and who had just locked me out of my home without warning. "Matthew damaged our relationship, not me," I replied. "Send the letter." After ending the call with Patricia, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, staring at the family photos on the refrigerator. There was Matthew holding newborn Jackson, me with Lily on her 5th birthday, all of us at the beach last summer. Happy memories that now felt like illustrations from a fiction novel someone else had written. The numbness protecting me began to crack, and tears welled in my eyes. Not sad tears but hot, angry ones that burned down my cheeks. How dare they? After everything I had sacrificed, after all the love I had poured into their lives, I had emptied my retirement fund to help them, had given up my independence, had shaped my entire life around supporting their family. And this was my reward. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Frank had always admired my strength, especially during his illness. "My Eleanor doesn't break," he would tell the hospice nurses admiringly. "She bends like a willow in the storm, then stands tall again." I could almost feel his hand on my shoulder as I dried my tears and began methodically packing the rest of my belongings. Barbara arrived 30 minutes after I called her. She walked in using her emergency key before they had changed the locks and helped me carry my suitcases to her car. "I knew that woman was trouble from the first time I met her," Barbara muttered as we loaded the trunk. "Always calculating, that one." "I saw it too," I admitted. "I just didn't want to believe Matthew would choose her over me." Men can be incredibly blind when it comes to manipulative women, Barbara said, closing the trunk with more force than necessary. Remember Diane's son last year? Same situation. Moved in with him after her husband died, contributed to the house. Then the daughter-in-law decided she wanted her space back. What happened with Diane? I asked as we drove away from the house I had helped create. She didn't fight. Ended up in that awful senior apartment complex on 4th Street. Depression got so bad she had to be hospitalized. Barbara glanced at me. But you're not Diane. You're fighting back, and Patricia Reynolds doesn't lose. Barbara's guest house was small but comfortable, with a bedroom, bathroom, and combined kitchen-living area. She helped me unpack and insisted I join her for dinner, tactfully avoiding further discussion of Matthew and Heather until I was ready. That evening I received 6 text messages and 3 voicemails from Matthew, each increasingly agitated. I listened to the first one. "Mom, please call me back. I know you're upset, but we can work this out. We'll help you find a nice apartment." I deleted all of them without responding and turned off my phone. According to Patricia, any communication now should go through her. The legal machinery was in motion, and personal conversations could only complicate matters. The next morning, Patricia called to confirm she had sent the letter by courier to ensure same-day delivery. "It outlines the legal issues their actions have created," she explained. "Elder financial abuse, breach of contract, unjust enrichment, and several other claims. I've demanded immediate restoration of your living rights and access to the property, or alternatively, full repayment of your investment plus interest and damages." "What kind of damages?" I asked. "Emotional distress, unlawful eviction, potential punitive damages for the financial abuse aspect." "Eleanor, what they've done isn't just morally wrong, it's illegal. They can't take your money, agree to partial ownership and living rights, then lock you out. That's not how property law works." "Matthew will be shocked," I said, feeling a complicated mix of vindication and sorrow. "He should be," Patricia replied firmly. "People need to understand that elder abuse has consequences." That afternoon, my phone exploded with calls and texts, not just from Matthew but from other family members as well. Apparently, he had been reaching out to everyone, telling them I had gone off the deep end, and was threatening to sue, because they had gently suggested I find my own place. My sister Grace called, concerned about the flurry of messages she'd received from Matthew. "He says you've hired a lawyer and are trying to take their house," she said. "What's really happening, Ellie?" I explained the situation truthfully, including my financial contribution and the signed agreement. "That little weasel," Grace said, her protective older sister instincts flaring. "And Heather's behind this, isn't she?" "I think so, but Matthew is equally responsible. He made his choice, Grace." "Well, I'm choosing you. What can I do to help?" Having Grace's unconditional support meant everything. She promised to set the record straight with other family members and offered to come stay with me, but I assured her Barbara was providing all the support I needed. The next day, Patricia called to inform me that Matthew had contacted her office in a panic. "He claims there's been a misunderstanding," she said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "He wants to meet and discuss options." "What did you tell him?" "That any meeting would need to include all parties and their legal representation." He mentioned they don't have an attorney yet, so I suggested several who might take their case. Her slight emphasis on might spoke volumes about how the legal community viewed such cases. We scheduled a mediation session for the following week. Patricia advised me to prepare emotionally for seeing Matthew and Heather, warning that they would likely portray me as confused, difficult, or mentally unstable. "It's the standard playbook in these situations," she explained. "They'll try to justify their actions by claiming you were impossible to live with. Be prepared, stay calm, and let me do the talking." The night before the mediation, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Barbara's garden, wrapped in one of Frank's old sweaters that still faintly held his scent, and wondered how we had arrived at this point. Where had I gone wrong with Matthew? Was it because I worked too much when he was young? Had Frank and I spoiled him? Or was this entirely Heather's influence? Barbara found me there at dawn, staring at the rising sun with red-rimmed eyes. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently, handing me a cup of coffee. "No, Iraplia. Just mourning what I've lost. Not the house or the money, but the son I thought I had. She squeezed my shoulder. Maybe this will be his wake-up call. Some people don't recognize their mistakes until they face consequences. I nodded, but in my heart, I knew something had broken that might never be repaired. Still, I would face today with dignity, just as I had faced every other challenge in my life. Frank would expect nothing less. The mediation took place in a sterile conference room at Patricia's law firm. I arrived early with Patricia, who reviewed our strategy one final time before Matthew and Heather were scheduled to appear. Remember, they're expecting you to be emotional and unfocused, she reminded me. Your calmness will unsettle them. Let them make the mistakes. At exactly 10 o'clock, Matthew and Heather entered the room. Matthew looked like he hadn't slept in days, dark circles under his eyes and his normally neat hair uncombed. Heather, by contrast, was immaculately dressed in a navy blue pantsuit that screamed competence and control. Her eyes met mine briefly before sliding away, but not before I caught the flash of contempt there. "Mom," Matthew began immediately, his voice pleading. Patricia held up her hand. "Mr. Wilson, as I explained on the phone, this is a formal mediation. All communication should go through me, or your legal representative." She looked pointedly at the empty chair beside them. "I see you've chosen to represent yourselves." "We didn't think we needed a lawyer for a family discussion," Heather replied, her tone suggesting Patricia was overcomplicating matters. "This ceased to be merely a family discussion when you changed the locks on a property Mrs. Wilson partially owns, and where she has established legal residency," Patricia countered smoothly. "But let's proceed." For the next hour, Patricia methodically presented our case, complete with documentation of my financial contribution, the written agreement, and evidence of the improvements and additional contributions I had made to the property over the past 5 years. She explained the legal principles of constructive trust, unjust enrichment, and elder financial abuse statutes in our state, all in a calm, matter-of-fact manner that made the seriousness of their actions unmistakable. Throughout the presentation, I watched Matthew's expression shift from defensive confidence to growing alarm. Heather maintained her composed facade, but her rapidly tapping foot beneath the table betrayed her anxiety. When Patricia finished, the mediator asked if they wished to respond. Heather immediately took control. "This is absurd," she began, leaning forward. "Eleanor gave us that money as a gift to help with the down payment. Yes, we agreed she could live with us, but it was always understood to be temporary until she found her own place. Is that why you put it in writing that she would have permanent living rights?" Patricia asked mildly, sliding a copy of the agreement across the table. "We never expected her to stay for 5 years," Heather continued, ignoring the document. "And frankly, her behavior has become increasingly difficult. She interferes with our parenting, criticizes my housekeeping, and has become paranoid and accusatory." I bit my tongue, letting Patricia handle the false narrative. "Do you have any documentation of these behavioral concerns? Medical evaluations? Witnesses other than yourselves?" Patricia asked. "We shouldn't need to prove my mother's difficult behavior," Matthew interjected. "Everyone knows how challenging elderly parents can become. We were trying to handle this compassionately, by helping her find appropriate senior housing. By changing the locks without warning?" Patricia raised an eyebrow. "That's your definition of compassionate?" The mediator, a gray-haired man who had remained silent throughout most of the exchange, finally spoke. "Let's focus on the legal aspects. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, the documentation presented strongly supports Mrs. Eleanor Wilson's claim of partial ownership. The agreement clearly states she has living rights for as long as she chooses. Changing the locks constitutes an illegal eviction. I strongly recommend you consult with an attorney before proceeding further." Heather's composure finally cracked. "This is ridiculous. She's trying to steal our house after we took her in out of kindness. $250,000 is an expensive form of kindness," Patricia observed dryly. "Mom," Matthew turned to me directly, ignoring Patricia's earlier direction. "Please. You know we love you. We just need our own space. Can't we work this out without lawyers and threats?" I met my son's gaze steadily. "You stopped working things out with me the moment you decided to lock me out of my home without warning, Matthew. This isn't about space. It's about respect and honesty, both of which you've shown me are in short supply. The mediator sighed. It's clear we won't resolve this today. My recommendation is that Mrs. Eleanor Wilson be immediately restored access to the property while a formal legal resolution is pursued, or alternatively, that the Wilsons immediately refund her financial contribution with appropriate interest. We don't have $250,000, Heather exclaimed, her face flushing. Then I suggest you consult with a real estate attorney about your options, the mediator replied. This meeting is adjourned. As we gathered our documents, Matthew made one last attempt to reach me. Mom, please don't do this. Think about Jackson and Lily. They miss you. The mention of my grandchildren pierced my heart, but Patricia had warned me they might use the children as emotional leverage. I miss them too, I replied quietly. Perhaps you should have considered them before changing the locks on their grandmother. Outside the building, Patricia looked pleased. That went exactly as expected. They came unprepared with no legal representation, assuming you would cave under emotional pressure. Classic mistake. What happens now? I asked, watching through the window as Matthew and Heather argued in the parking lot. Now we file the formal lawsuit. Given what transpired today, I'd be surprised if they don't make an offer before it gets to court. They know they don't have a case. 2 days later, Patricia called to inform me that Matthew had reached out through a newly hired attorney, requesting another meeting. They want to discuss a settlement, she said. I told them we'd consider it, but our terms remain firm. Either full restoration of your living rights with a formal apology and guarantees against future harassment, or complete financial restitution plus damages. Which do you think they'll choose? I asked. Given Heather's attitude, I'd be surprised if they opt for you moving back in. They'll likely try to gather the funds for restitution. That evening, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Grandma. Jackson's small voice came through the line. Are you okay? Dad said you're sick and had to go away. My heart constricted. I'm not sick, sweetheart. I'm staying with my friend Barbara for a while. Mom said we can't visit you. She said you're mad at them. I'm not mad at you, Jackson. Never at you or Lily. I miss you both very much. We miss you too. Lily cries at bedtime because you're not here to read her story. I closed my eyes against fresh tears. Tell Lily I love her, okay? And that I'll see you both as soon as I can. Promise. The hope in his voice broke my heart. I promise, sweetheart. After we hung up, I called Patricia. They're telling the children I'm sick, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Using them as pawns in this game. Document the call, she advised. This strengthens our case for emotional distress damages. And Eleanor? We're going to win this. Not just for you but for Jackson and Lily too. They deserve to know their grandmother stood up for herself. The formal lawsuit was filed the next day, seeking $250,000 in restitution plus interest, $100,000 in emotional distress damages, and additional punitive damages for elder financial abuse. As Patricia had predicted, the local news picked up the story, running a piece titled Grandmother Sues Son After Being Locked Out of Home She Helped Purchase. The public exposure seemed to especially impact Heather, who, according to Barbara's neighborhood sources, had stopped attending her weekly tennis matches at the country club. Matthew called Patricia's office daily, increasingly desperate to settle the matter privately. But Patricia held firm to our demands, knowing we had both the law and public opinion on our side. 3 weeks after filing the lawsuit, Matthew escalated his defense strategy in the most painful way possible. Through his attorney, he submitted a motion suggesting I was mentally incompetent and suffering from early dementia, requesting a court-ordered evaluation before proceedings continued. It's a desperate move, Patricia assured me as I sat in her office, trembling with hurt and rage. But we need to address it head-on. I've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Landry, one of the top geriatric psychiatrists in the state. Her evaluation will put this nonsense to rest. Dr. Landry's comprehensive evaluation found me not only mentally competent, but exceptionally sharp and psychologically resilient. Her report specifically noted, Mrs. Wilson shows no signs of cognitive impairment or psychological instability. Her responses to this difficult family situation are entirely appropriate and rational. Armed with this professional assessment, Patricia filed a strongly worded response to Matthew's motion, requesting sanctions for what she termed a frivolous and malicious attempt to impugn Mrs. Wilson's mental capacity without any medical basis. The judge agreed, denying Matthew's motion and ordering him to pay the costs of the psychiatric evaluation. It was our first clear victory, but the war was far from over. What finally broke the case open came from an unexpected source. Grace, while sorting through old family videos to create a backup copy for me, discovered footage from a family gathering 3 years earlier. In the video, captured during Jackson's birthday party, Matthew could be clearly heard telling his uncle about the house arrangement. "Mom put in $250 grand, he said proudly on the recording. "She owns about 30% of the place. Best arrangement ever. She helps with the kids, we take care of her, and everybody wins." The video continued with Matthew explicitly acknowledging the permanence of the arrangement. "She'll live with us for the rest of her life. We've got it all in writing. After everything she and Dad did for me, it's the least I can do." Patricia was ecstatic when I showed her the video. "This is the smoking gun," she declared. His own words completely contradict their current claims that it was a temporary arrangement or a gift. With this evidence, they don't have a leg to stand on. Even more surprising was the phone call I received from Robert and Susan Carter, Heather's parents. They had seen the news coverage and wanted to meet with me privately. Wary but curious, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location. "Eleanor, we're ashamed of Heather's behavior," Susan said once we were seated. "We raised her better than this." Robert nodded gravely. "We've tried talking to her, but she won't listen. She keeps insisting you were interfering in their marriage, but we know you better than that." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by their support. "This has been the hardest thing I've ever faced." "We want you to know we're on your side," Susan continued. "We've already told Matthew and Heather we won't be providing any financial help to fight this case. What they did was wrong, and they need to make it right." Their solidarity meant more than they could know. As painful as this battle had become, I was discovering unexpected allies and a strength within myself I hadn't known existed. Frank would have been proud. The night before the scheduled court hearing, I sat in Barbara's garden again, this time feeling not despair but a strange calm. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be discarded like an inconvenient obligation. The money mattered, of course it did, but what mattered more was the principle. No one, not even my own son, had the right to treat me this way. Barbara joined me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Eleanor Wilson against the world," she smiled. "My money's on Eleanor." The morning of the court hearing dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy dress and pearl earrings Frank had given me for our 30th anniversary. Patricia had advised projecting confidence and dignity, knowing photographs might appear in local media. "Your appearance matters," she explained. "You need to look like exactly what you are, a respectable, competent woman who has been wronged." We were preparing to leave for the courthouse when Patricia's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she turned to me with a surprised expression. "That was Matthew's attorney. He wants to meet privately before the hearing. Just Matthew, not Heather." My heart skipped. What do you think it means? It could be a last-minute settlement offer, or... She hesitated. It could be that he's finally recognized the severity of the situation. "Do you want to meet with him?" Part of me wanted to refuse, to let the legal process play out without the emotional complication of facing my son. But another part, the mother who had held him through childhood fevers and celebrated his triumphs, couldn't deny him this chance. "Yes," I decided. "But you'll be with me." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the courthouse. Patricia and I arrived first, selecting a quiet corner table. When Matthew entered 10 minutes later, I barely recognized him. The confident, successful man who had locked me out of my home was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated. Dark circles underlined his bloodshot eyes, and he'd lost weight, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. "Mom," he said simply, his voice hoarse. Patricia nodded toward the empty chair across from us. Mr. Wilson, you requested this meeting. We have 30 minutes before we need to leave for court. Matthew sat heavily, hands clasped before him on the table. I wanted to see you alone, he began, glancing at Patricia. Mrs. Wilson has requested my presence for all communications, she replied firmly. Given recent events, I'm sure you understand why. He nodded reluctantly. Mom, I've made a terrible mistake. I let things go too far, and I don't know how to fix it. Changing the locks on your mother's home goes beyond a mistake, Patricia interjected, as does falsely claiming she suffers from dementia. Matthew winced. The dementia claim was Heather's idea. She thought it would help our case. I knew it was wrong, but I went along with it. I've been going along with everything, and look where it's gotten us. He gestured vaguely at the situation. Where's Heather now? I asked, noticing his wedding ring was missing. She left, he said flatly. 3 days ago. Said she couldn't handle the public embarrassment, that everyone at her office and the club was talking about us. Took the kids to her parents' house in Phoenix. Despite everything, my heart ached for his obvious pain. I'm sorry about your marriage, Matthew. He gave a bitter laugh. Are you? This is what you wanted, isn't it? To destroy my life because I made one mistake. Patricia stiffened beside me, but I placed a restraining hand on her arm. Is that really what you think this is about? Revenge? Matthew, you took my home, my security, my dignity. You tried to paint me as mentally unstable to justify stealing my investment. Those aren't mistakes, they're choices. He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't think of it that way. Heather kept saying you had manipulated us into the arrangement, that the money was a gift you later tried to control us with. After a while, I started believing it. And the video where you clearly stated the terms of our agreement? The legally binding document you signed? Patricia asked. I know, he whispered. There's no excuse. What do you want from this meeting, Matthew? I asked directly. The hearing is in an hour. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with tears. I want to make this right. I can't give you back the money right now. The house is mortgaged and with Heather gone. He swallowed hard. But I can give you back your home. Your room is untouched. I know it's not enough, but it's a start. Patricia and I exchanged glances. This wasn't what we had expected. And Heather? I asked. If she returns? She won't, he said with certainty. She's already talking about divorce. Says she can't be married to someone with my toxic family dynamics. Her words, not mine. My son, my only child, sat broken before me. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and take his hand, to tell him everything would be all right. But the part of me that had grown stronger through this ordeal knew better. Easy forgiveness now would only enable similar behavior in the future. Moving back isn't an option, I said firmly. Too much has happened, Matthew. I need my own space now, my own home where no one can ever lock me out again. His face fell, but he nodded in understanding. Then I'll find a way to repay you. I'll take a second mortgage, sell the house if necessary. We can discuss payment terms, Patricia offered, her tone softening slightly. If you're willing to acknowledge the full debt and sign a legally binding repayment agreement today, we can postpone the hearing. Yes, he agreed immediately. Anything. Patricia extracted a document from her briefcase. I anticipated this possibility and prepared the necessary paperwork. It stipulates full acknowledgement of the debt, a payment schedule, and interest at a reasonable rate. It also includes a public apology and retraction of all claims regarding Mrs. Wilson's mental capacity. Matthew scanned the document, then looked up at me. I'll sign it. But Mom, the apology isn't just for legal reasons. I am sorry. More than I can ever express. For the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of hope for our relationship. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility that someday we might find our way back to something resembling family. Actions will matter more than words going forward, I told him. Starting with how you speak about me to Jackson and Lily. They deserve the truth, Matthew. An age-appropriate version, but the truth nonetheless. I'll tell them, he promised. They miss you terribly. I miss them too. My voice nearly broke on the words. After Matthew signed the agreement, Patricia excused herself to call the court and request a postponement based on the settlement. Matthew and I sat in uncomfortable silence until I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. Why, Matthew? After everything we've been through as a family, how could you treat me this way? He stared into his untouched coffee, shoulders slumped. I wish I had a good answer. Heather had been pushing for years, saying we needed our independence, that you were too involved in our lives. At first I defended you, but over time, I don't know. It was easier to agree with her than fight. Then one fight led to another, and she gave me an ultimatum. Her or me, I said quietly. He nodded miserably. I made the wrong choice. I knew it was wrong even as I was doing it, but I convinced myself it was just about living arrangements, not about choosing between you. I was a coward, Mom. The raw honesty in his admission stirred complicated emotions. My son had betrayed me deeply, had allowed his wife to manipulate him into mistreating his own mother. Yet here he sat, broken and repentant. Was there room in my heart for both accountability and compassion? We have a long road ahead of us, I finally said. Trust takes years to build and moments to break. I can't promise you things will ever be the same between us. I know, he whispered, but I want to try. Not just for the kids, but for us. You're my mom. I don't want to lose you. Patricia returned, informing us the hearing had been rescheduled pending review of our settlement agreement. As we prepared to leave, Matthew hesitantly asked if he could hug me. I wasn't ready for that level of physical reconciliation and offered my hand instead. The disappointment in his eyes was palpable, but he respected my boundary and shook my hand formally. I'll call about arranging visits with the children, I told him. Once they're back from Phoenix. Anytime, he promised. Day or night. They're your grandchildren. As Patricia and I walked to her car, she gave me a sidelong glance. Are you okay with how this turned out? We could have gotten more in court. This isn't about the money anymore, I replied, watching Matthew's defeated figure through the coffee shop window. It's about setting things right and establishing boundaries that will allow healing, if that's possible. You're more forgiving than most clients in your position, she observed. Not forgiving, I corrected her. Not yet, but perhaps willing to leave the door open a crack, rather than slamming it shut forever. The truth was, I didn't know if Matthew and I could ever rebuild what we had lost. But I did know that closing the door completely would only guarantee more pain. Not just for us, but for Jackson and Lily as well. Sometimes the braver choice isn't walking away, but staying engaged while holding firm boundaries. As we drove away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever came next, I had stood my ground and advocated for myself when it mattered most. Frank would have been proud of that, and truthfully, so was I. The weeks following our courthouse meeting brought significant changes to all our lives. Matthew began making payments according to our agreement, starting with a lump sum he'd gathered by selling his car and some investments. It wasn't nearly the full amount, but it demonstrated his commitment to making amends. I used the initial payment to secure a small rental apartment while I searched for a permanent home. Barbara had been wonderfully generous with her guest house, but we both knew it wasn't a long-term solution. My new apartment was nothing special, just a one-bedroom in a quiet complex across town. But it was mine. No one could lock me out or question my right to be there. 2 weeks after Heather took the children to Phoenix, Matthew called to tell me they were returning. Her parents sided with you, he explained, a note of wonder in his voice. They told her she was behaving shamefully and needed to bring the kids home immediately. They're arriving tomorrow. How are things between you? I asked cautiously. His sigh carried the weight of a collapsing marriage. She's staying at a hotel. Says she needs space to reconsider our relationship. Meanwhile, I need to figure out childcare while working full-time. I hesitated before making the offer. I could help with the children if you'd like. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. You would do that? He finally asked. After everything? I'm not doing it for you, Matthew. I'm doing it for Jackson and Lily. They shouldn't suffer because of adult problems. We arranged for me to watch the children 3 days a week while he worked. It wasn't the same as living together, but it allowed me to maintain my critical role in their lives while establishing healthy boundaries with Matthew. Our first reunion was tearful and joyous. Jackson and Lily burst into my apartment like whirlwinds, throwing themselves into my arms with such force that I nearly toppled backward. "Grandma, you're not sick anymore," Lily exclaimed, her small hands framing my face as if to confirm I was really there. "I was never sick, sweetheart," I said gently, shooting Matthew a pointed look over her head. "I just needed my own place for a while." "Dad said you and Mom had a big fight," Jackson said with the bluntness of a 10-year-old. Matthew cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Jackson, remember what we discussed? This was an adult problem that Grandma and I are working through. It wasn't Grandma's fault." His willingness to take responsibility in front of the children surprised me. Perhaps there was hope for him yet. As the children settled in, exploring my small apartment with curious excitement, Matthew pulled me aside. "I told them the truth," he said quietly. "An age-appropriate version, like you said. That you helped us buy our house, that you had every right to live there, and that I made a terrible mistake in asking you to leave." How did they take it? Jackson was angry with me. Asked how I could be so mean to his grandma. A flush of shame colored his cheeks. Lily didn't fully understand, but she knew enough to tell me I needed to say sorry and fix it like when I break things. "Out of the mouths of babes," I murmured. "I'm trying, Mom. To fix it, I mean." I nodded acknowledgement, neither accepting nor rejecting his ongoing apology. Time would tell whether his remorse translated into lasting change. Over the next few months we established a new normal. I watched the children regularly, sometimes at my apartment, sometimes at Matthew's house while he was at work. Heather filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, rather than the public humiliation that had truly driven her away. Matthew didn't contest it, agreeing to her terms for joint custody and division of assets. "The house will have to be sold," he told me one evening after dropping off the children. "There's no way I can afford the mortgage and the settlement payments to you on my salary alone. What will you do?" I asked, surprised by my genuine concern for his future. "Downsize. Find a 3-bedroom apartment or small house we can afford. Start over." His matter-of-fact acceptance of these consequences impressed me. The entitled man who had locked me out was gone, replaced by someone who understood accountability. By the 6-month mark, I had saved enough from Matthew's payments and my Social Security to make a down payment on a small townhouse in a pleasant neighborhood not far from Matthew's current home. It had 2 bedrooms, just enough space for me and occasional visits from the grandchildren. The day I signed the closing papers, I felt Frank's presence so strongly I nearly turned to share my excitement with him. "I did it, Frank," I whispered instead. "I've got my own place again." That evening, I invited Grace over to see the new place and celebrate with a bottle of wine. "To new beginnings," she toasted, clinking her glass against mine. "And to my sister, the strongest woman I know." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "Some days I still cry when I think about how Matthew betrayed me." "That's not weakness, Ellie. That's being human. The strength is in how you handled it, standing up for yourself instead of letting them walk all over you." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive him?" I swirled the wine in my glass, considering. "I'm working on it. Not for his sake but for mine. The anger weighs too much, Grace. I don't want to carry it forever." "And Heather?" I laughed without humor. "That's a different story. Some people earn their way out of your life permanently." Moving day arrived with unexpected help. Matthew showed up early, bringing Jackson and Lily to assist. "We want to help Grandma," Lily announced, proudly carrying a small plant she'd grown from my new kitchen windowsill. Together, we transformed the empty townhouse into a home. It wasn't the retirement I'd imagined while Frank was alive, or even the one I'd pictured when moving in with Matthew and Heather. It was something entirely new, built on hard-won wisdom and unexpected strength. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat alone on my new patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A text message chimed on my phone. "The kids can't stop talking about your new place," Matthew had written. "They're already planning sleepovers. Thank you for not shutting them out of your life because of my mistakes." I typed back simply, "They're innocent in all this. They'll always be welcome." After a moment, another message appeared. And me? That question carried the weight of our entire painful journey. Was there a path forward for Matthew and me? Could we rebuild something resembling the mother-son relationship we once had? One day at a time, I replied finally. We're still family. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was an acknowledgement that despite everything, the door remained open a crack. And sometimes that's where healing begins. 6 months into my life at the townhouse, the rhythms of my new normal had become comfortably familiar. My home was modest but entirely mine, decorated with treasured photographs and mementos that told the story of my life. Frank's armchair occupied a special place by the living room window, and though it remained empty, its presence comforted rather than haunted me. The grandchildren visited regularly, their energy filling my quiet spaces with laughter and chaos. Jackson had appointed himself my official tech support, setting up my new smart TV and teaching me to use video calling so we could chat on days we couldn't visit in person. Lily had claimed the second bedroom as her room, decorating it with artwork and small treasures she brought on each visit. Matthew maintained a respectful distance, dropping the children off but rarely coming inside unless specifically invited. He continued making his monthly payments faithfully, often adding a little extra when he could. Our interactions remained cordial if somewhat formal, both of us navigating the strange territory between estrangement and reconciliation. His divorce from Heather had been finalized, with a custody arrangement giving him the children 4 days a week. He'd found a small 3-bedroom ranch house across town, downsizing significantly from the home we had shared. According to Jackson, Heather had a fancy new apartment and a boyfriend already, though she remained cold toward me during the rare occasions our paths crossed at school events. One Tuesday morning, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Matthew standing there, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot, a large envelope in his hands. Matthew? The children are in school. Did we have plans I forgot about? No, he said, his voice unusually nervous. I was hoping we could talk. Just for a few minutes. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. We sat in the living room, the space between us filled with unspoken history. I wanted to give you this, he said, handing me the envelope. It's taken me longer than I hoped, but I finally got a loan to cover the remaining balance I owe you. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check for the outstanding amount, along with a handwritten letter. I set the check aside and unfolded the paper, recognizing Matthew's neat handwriting. Mom, it began. No words can adequately express my remorse for how I treated you. Your strength in standing up for yourself taught me the hardest and most important lesson of my life. I lost my moral compass and allowed someone else's influence to override my own values and the respect I owe you. There is no excuse for my behavior, only a promise that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of having you in it again. With love and deepest regret, Matthew. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope, unsure how to respond. The money was important, of course it was, but it couldn't erase the memory of that phone call, of being locked out of my home, of the painful months that followed. Thank you for the payment, I said finally. It's not about the money, he replied, his voice strained. I know that doesn't fix what happened. Nothing can. But I needed you to know how sorry I am, in writing something you can keep. I studied my son's face, noting the new lines around his eyes, the humility that had replaced his former confidence. He had suffered consequences for his actions, losing his marriage, his home, and nearly his relationship with me. The question was whether those hard lessons had truly changed him. I received a call from Grace yesterday, I said, changing the subject. She's coming for Thanksgiving next month. Will you and the children join us? The invitation clearly surprised him. You want us here? For a holiday. Family should be together for holidays, I replied simply. Even imperfect families. The smile that spread across his face reminded me of the little boy who had once looked at me as if I hung the moon. We'd love to come. Can I bring anything? Your father's stuffing recipe. You were always better at making it than I was. As Matthew prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Mom, I know things can never go back to how they were before. But I hope someday you can truly forgive me. I considered my answer carefully. I'm working on it, Matthew. That's the best I can offer right now. He nodded in understanding. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. After he left, I sat in Frank's chair, thinking about forgiveness and its complicated relationship with trust. Forgiveness might be possible, perhaps even necessary for my own peace of mind, but trust would take much longer to rebuild, if it ever could be fully restored. That afternoon, I drove to the elder rights organization where I'd been volunteering since moving into my townhouse. What had started as a way to fill lonely hours had become a meaningful part of my new life. I helped other seniors navigate legal issues, shared my experience, and advocated for stronger protections against elder abuse. Patricia had introduced me to the organization during our case, suggesting that helping others might aid my own healing process. She'd been right. Every time I helped another older person stand up for their rights, I felt a little more of my own power return. Eleanor. Diane greeted me warmly as I entered the office. She was the woman Barbara had mentioned, the one who hadn't fought back when her family took advantage of her. After her hospitalization for depression, she'd eventually found her way to the organization as a client, then stayed on as a volunteer like me. You're just in time. We have a new case I think you'd be perfect for. The case involved a 72-year-old woman whose daughter and son-in-law had convinced her to sell her home and move in with them, only to relegate her to a converted garage and control her finances. It was painfully familiar, and I felt an immediate connection to her situation. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. Working with Martha, the woman from the new case, reinforced how far I'd come in my own journey. 6 months earlier I had been devastated, questioning my worth and my place in the world. Now I was helping another woman reclaim her dignity and financial independence. I could never do what you did, Martha told me during one of our meetings. Stand up to my own daughter like that. 6 months ago I would have said the same thing, I replied. But when it came down to it, I discovered I was stronger than I knew. And so are you. By the time Thanksgiving arrived, my townhouse had been transformed with modest decorations and the aroma of traditional holiday cooking. Grace arrived first, bringing wine and her famous pecan pie. Matthew and the children followed an hour later, Jackson carrying a carefully wrapped bowl of stuffing made from Frank's recipe. Grandma! Lily launched herself into my arms. I made place cards for everyone. And I put you and Daddy next to each other so you can talk and be friends again. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Dinner was initially awkward, with Grace shooting Matthew evaluative glances when she thought I wasn't looking. But gradually, the familiar rhythms of family meals took over. Jackson told us about his science project, Lily recounted every detail of her ballet recital, and Matthew shared amusing stories about his misadventures in single parenting. Remember when Dad tried to do laundry that time Mom was in the hospital? Matthew asked me, referring to an incident decades earlier when Frank had turned all our white clothes pink. How could I forget? He wore those pink undershirts for years rather than admit he'd ruined them. We laughed together and for a moment it felt like old times. Then I caught myself remembering all that had happened. Matthew must have sensed the shift in my mood. I think about Dad a lot these days, he said quietly while the children were distracted with dessert. About what he would think of all this. He would have been disappointed, I said honestly. But he always believed in second chances. He gave me plenty over the years. Matthew nodded, a shimmer of tears in his eyes. I'm trying to be the man he raised me to be. I lost my way for a while. We all lose our way sometimes, I conceded. The question is whether we find our way back. After dinner, while Grace helped the children make paper turkeys at the dining table, Matthew and I stepped onto the patio for a moment of privacy. Thank you for today, he said. For including us. It means more than you know. We're still family, Matthew. Damaged, healing, but family nonetheless. He hesitated, then asked, Can I give you a hug? It's okay if you're not ready. This time, I didn't offer my hand instead. I opened my arms and allowed my son to embrace me for the first time since before the locks were changed. It wasn't the same trusting embrace we once shared, but it was a start. As the evening wound down and everyone prepared to leave, Jackson pulled me aside. Dad's different now, he said with a child's directness. He's sad a lot, but he's nicer too. He listens more. Sometimes difficult experiences change us for the better, I told him, if we learn from them. Are you still mad at him? My grandson asked. Not mad anymore, I answered truthfully. Just careful. Trust takes time to rebuild. Like when I broke Mom's favorite vase and she didn't let me near the breakable stuff for a whole year? I smiled at his simple but accurate analogy. Something like that. After everyone had left and the house was quiet again, I sat in Frank's chair, mentally reviewing the day. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been genuine. No pretending the past hadn't happened, but no dwelling on it either. Just people who loved each other, despite their flaws and mistakes, finding a way forward together. My phone chimed with a text from Matthew. Thank you again for today. The kids are already asking when we can come back. I replied, Sunday dinner next week? I'll make Frank's lasagna. His response came quickly. We'll be there. I set the phone aside and gazed around my cozy living room. This wasn't the life I had planned, but perhaps it was the life I needed. I had lost my home but found my strength. I had been betrayed but discovered true friends. I had nearly lost my son but was slowly finding a new, more honest relationship with him. Most importantly, I had learned that standing up for myself didn't mean standing alone. There were people who valued me, who respected my boundaries, who saw my worth beyond what I could give them. At 67, I had started a new chapter one never expected. One where I was the author of my own story, rather than a supporting character in someone else's. Frank would indeed have been proud. Not just of my standing up to Matthew, but of my willingness to leave the door open for healing. Of finding the balance between self-respect and compassion. Of building a life that honored both my past and my future. As the evening stars appeared outside my window, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. The journey wasn't over, but I was on the right path. And for tonight, that was enough. Before going to bed, I have one final message for everyone watching this video. Have you ever had to stand up to family who took advantage of you? Did you find the strength to set boundaries, even when it was painful? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found strength or inspiration in my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself and discover just how strong you truly are. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to write your own next chapter, whatever it may be.